How have these 5 hitters been since returning to the majors? Fernando Tatis, 2-4. I believe he wound up 2-for-5 in that game with a steal and 2 runs scored. 13 games since returning, a 3.08 batting average, 4 homers, 11 runs, 2 steals, and OPS over 900. He's basically been Fernando Tatis, which is crazy because he's been out for so long. It kind of surprised me, Chris, that in the sample we have this year, 93 games, he's only on pace for 29 homers and 16 steals. That's a 150 game pace. But even if we bump it up to a full season pace, it's like barely over 30 homers, close to 20 steals. That's a good season, but is it a first round player? I don't know. It kind of feels like it isn't.
No, and I don't know if you guys talked about this last night, but Scott did his, way too early ranking of the first 2 rounds. He did have Tatis 14th in Roto.
That sounds right.
It sounds right. It feels a little high at first blush. I think I would take Julio Rodriguez ahead of him. Corbin Carroll's a tough one. Some pitchers are, I think the range is right. I think not first round, but close. And the key thing there is the underlying numbers are still very, very good for Fernando Tatis. And his expected WOBA on the season, 394. That's a little bit worse than the 2020-2021 peak for him. But the strikeout rate is much lower. He still hits the ball really, really hard, really consistently. So, yeah, I still think Fernando Tatis has top 5 upside. I think the biggest question is whether the speed is going to come back, because he has only stolen 2 bases in 13 games since coming back, which I guess that's not a terrible pace. So the speed just kind of hasn't been there all year, and his sprint speed is down to 76th percentile. Is that because of the fibula injury? Was that limiting him before he went on the IL?
I would guess yes.
Yeah, I think they said as much. I think there was a quote that it was something that he had been dealing with for a little while. So maybe that's the explanation here. But I think he's, for the most part, still a sub-elite but very, very, very good player for Roto. And honestly, with the strikeout rate improvements, probably not a big gap between his Roto and his head-to-head performance this season.
Yeah. If I'm just way too early projections for next year for Tatis, 275, 25 to 30 homers, 20 to 25 steals, pretty good counting stats. I feel like that's a pretty fair projection for him, which,
it feels a little low.
Yeah, you think so?
I think like 285, 30 to 35 homers. And obviously the ceiling is 40 to 45 and a 310 batting average.
My only thing is that since he's returned from, all the steroid suspension and PED suspension and
shoulder and wrist
surgery, back from the power hasn't been the same. So he was
this year the underlying numbers are much better.
191 ISO last year, 202 ISO this year. I don't know.
It's not great.
Yeah, kind of feels like a 25 to 30 home run hitter, but
sure.
Yeah. How has Junior Caminero been? 2-for-4 with his 4th home run in 33 games with the Rays. He's batting .256, 4 home runs, 745 OPS. Plate discipline is mostly fine. He's been a little bit too aggressive, I would say. Ground ball rate is a little bit high. He's also super young, and this is like his first legit taste in the major, so I don't want to overreact too much to it. But Chris, what's been your takeaway from Junior Caminero so far?
So this is kind of an aesthetic comp, but watching him today, he hit a home run today, right? That was where the highlight came from. Yeah, and it was like one of those ones that was like way above the strike zone. He's got a pretty flat bat path, and it sort of reminds me of Yandy Diaz. And what we've seen so far is kind of Yandy Diaz-esque, where he hits the ball hard. Plate discipline's not quite that good, but whose is. But he tends to hit a lot of line drives and a lot of ground balls and not a ton of fly balls yet. It's an elite young player, 21 years old, great minor league numbers. I think it's worth betting on. The fact that he's holding his own is, I think, a very good sign. I do wonder if the power is going to play up immediately. as like difference making. Because I do think, the underlying skills could get to, it could be 30 plus raw power, raw homer upside, but, it might be more like 20 projecting for 2025.
Yeah, which is pretty much spot on. If you look at the Fangraphs prospect grades, the 20 to 80 scale, they have his raw power right now at 70, but his in-game power only at 50.
Yeah.
So that seems to line up with what we're talking about here. If I'm just conservatively, again, projecting for next season, I'd probably expect something like 20, low 20s in home runs for Caminero. But if he figures out, pulling the ball, putting it in the air a little bit, I mean, we could very easily see like 30 plus home run power from Junior Caminero. What about Tristan Casas? 1 for 2 with his 9th home run. He has been sitting out against lefties lately. He's only started 8 of the past 13 games, and in 29 games since returning, 247 batting average, 3 home runs, 11 RBI, and OPS under 700 with a 37% strikeout rate. I'm not sure how many people that are competing for anything are still using Tristan Casas at this point. You probably could get away from him for the rest of this season. He's just missed so much time. I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think I'm still going to be really excited about Casas for next season too.
So the one thing I would say is last year he held his own against lefties, but that was with like a 33% strikeout rate, 32% strikeout rate. This year, it's only 52 plate appearances. Last year was only 97. The 712 OPS is not bad for a lefty against lefties. Like that's playable. 20 strikeouts and 52 plate appearances is a problem. Yeah. And he hasn't gotten as many opportunities this year. Obviously, lately he's just not playing against them. You can't get better if you don't face lefties. And so that is my one concern, is that are the Red Sox viewing him more like a platoon bat? I think that would be a mistake to do with a 24-year-old with his kind of skill set. But that if I have a concern, it's that.
What about Max Muncy? 3 for 5 with 2 doubles, 5 RBI, and his first stolen base. 24 games since returning from the IL, 250 batting average, 6 homers, OPS over 900. He's hitting tons of fly balls. He's pulling it. He's hitting the ball extremely hard. The barrel rate is there. He's another one. He's basically been Max Muncy. It's a little frustrating because I would have loved to see what he could do over a full season in that stacked lineup in terms of just the home runs and the counting stats.
Yeah.
And man, if he could stay healthy for next year, it's been hard to bet on health for Max Muncy.
Yep.
But I mean, everything in this recent stretch says that, man, he still could be an elite hitter, elite power hitter, at least.
The counting stats are pretty bonkers. In the 64 games he's played, 45 RBI, 15 homers, 40 runs. Just doing a little head math. That sounds like 40 homers, 100 runs, like 110 RBI. I don't think you should actually expect that from Max Muncy, but let's not forget he hit 36 homers last season. And that's like, he was dreadful for the first 2/3 of the season in 2022, but basically since like August or September of 2022, he's just been Max Muncy. And I know we expect him to slow down at some point. We haven't really seen it. I don't know. He might just be really, really good, and it might just be worth taking whatever injury discount you can get on him, because if he goes late enough, and I don't know, like just eyeballing it, it feels like this is a guy who could easily fall outside of the top 175 on draft day next year. That's, you get to a point, I've made this point about Byron Buxton in the past, you get to a point where I don't care how much time a guy misses. If he's 175th overall in the draft and I get 55 really good games out of him, I'll figure it out. Like it's a reason to not draft a player in the top 100, but to avoid a guy with that kind of upside, if he falls closer to 200, I think that's a mistake.
The full season pace for Max Muncy this year, 37 home runs, 113 RBI. So
there you go.
Still pretty much on track with what he's been doing. Jordan Walker hit another home run, 1 for 3 with his 4th homer, and it was hit pretty hard. 108 exit velocity, 425 feet. in 16 games since returning to the Cardinals. 250 batting average, 4 homers, 1 steal, and OPS right around 800. He's been solid, 33% rostered. If you're just looking forward the final week, the Cardinals have 6 games, 3 in Coors Field. So 5 outfielder leagues, I can get with it on Jordan Walker for the final week.
Yeah, and he has continued to hit the ball really hard. At AAA, the overall numbers were not great, but if you were looking at the trends, he was starting to hit more barrels, hit more line drives, hit more fly balls to the pull side over the final month before he was initially called up back in was that early August when he first got called up for a few days and then they sent him back down?
Yep.
And now he's starting to do that at the major league level. It's still striking out too much, 30% strikeout rate. It's even higher since he came back, right? 35%. But I don't know. It's one of those situations where he swings and misses a decent amount, but like his in-zone contact rate this season is 85%. It's actually solidly better than league average right now. So it's mostly a problem of not swinging. He only swings at 66% of pitches in the strike zone. If he can find a way to be more selectively aggressive, I still think the raw skills here for Jordan Walker are really impressive. And is he 23 yet?
I don't think
He's 22 and 119 days. I think he is younger than like several of the top 10 picks from this year's MLB draft. So that's something to keep in mind with Jordan Walker. I can't imagine, unless he just goes bonkers over the next 12 days, that he's going to cost much for 2025 drafts. I think it's reasonable to be skeptical about any young Cardinals player. They have not had a great track record lately, but I will be drafting Jordan Walker as a sleeper in 2025.